segment is Leaders Discussion, Leadership Garage, Leading in Age of Thinking Machines. And we have a stellar panel for this one. So I'm going to invite them up on stage one by one as I read out the introductions. We have joining us D. Shivakumar, Group Executive President, Aditya Birla Management Corporation Private Limited. Shiv, as he is popularly known, is currently Group Executive President at Aditya Birla Group for Strategy and Business Development. He joined the ABG Group in January 2018. Prior to this, he was Chairman and CEO for PepsiCo for 4 years, and before that with Nokia as CEO for India, and later emerging markets for nearly a decade. He's been a CEO for half his career and one was the youngest CEOs in India. He worked for HUL for a number of years, mostly in marketing. He's worked with over 50 brands in his career and has seen multiple business transformations. He's a writer, author, and I could go on and on. Joining him, we have Nitin Seth, Incedo Inc., CEO. He has a unique combination of experiences, an entrepreneur, a management consultant, an industry leader. Previously, he was COO Flipkart, MD and Country Head India Fidelity International, Director McKinsey Global Knowledge Center, founder Active Karma Ventures. He has an MBA from IIM Lucknow and a BTech from IIT Delhi. Joining them, we have Debjani Ghosh, President-Designate, NASSCOM. She's former VP, SMG Intel and MD Intel South Asia. She started with Intel in '96 and has held numerous leadership roles over her 21-year career with the company. She currently serves as an independent director on the board of Yes Bank and is a member of Cisco's India Advisory Board. She's also a trustee of NASSCOM Foundation and honorary advisor, FICCI S&T Innovation Committee. She's a strong believer in equal opportunities and regarded a very strong champion for diversity and equality in corporate India. The first woman Intel India country head and the first woman president of MAIT, she's been ranked by Fortune India as one of the top 20 most powerful women in business in India for 5 consecutive years since 2012. She dreams of India emerging as the most innovative country in the world and also a country where women achieve full representation. And moderating this panel, we have yet another star. I'd like to invite on stage our session moderator, Siddharth Zarabi. He is the managing editor of Business Television India and is responsible for all editorial and programming content for the channel. A technology enthusiast, Siddharth is a master's of business administration and chose journalism as his calling in life. Ladies and gentlemen, the power-packed panel for the garage discussion on leadership. All yours, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Very warm welcome to this fantastic panel, great panel of talent, marketing, technology, and people who have seen what this subject is all about. And just to sort of elaborate on the theme, if I'm allowed to say, this is a pretty big garage which has lots of leadership talent from your industry here. So what are we going to do here? I'll just lay out the ground rules for a minute. All 3 panelists will make opening comments, 3 to 4 minutes on the subject at hand. We'll try and get some questions towards the end of the panel. So if you have them, please keep them ready. I think we'll have time for a couple of questions before the next session. We want to stick to time. And what are the topics really? If technology is evolving at such a fast pace, how can the leadership which runs enterprises, which manages that technology, also perhaps move along at a fast pace? I'm going to try and relate this subject through the industry that I belong to. I run the 3rd largest business information and equity markets television platform in the country. And I can tell you, we are like 18, 20 months old. I can tell you in these 20 months, there has been so much change that it is forcing not just the top level management of our company, but even mid-level people to adapt. And just to give you an example, 3/4 of all trading on our market platforms is now happening through a code and not by individuals. And therefore, intermediary platforms like ourselves, which are trying to relate this to a wide audience, don't know how to relate to that. Just by one example, you would have noticed, for those of you who invest in the markets directly or indirectly, a few weeks back, there was something called a flash crash. And the management challenge of that flash crash, and this is my cue to Shiva, and I'll go to him first on this. The challenge of managing that flash crash was, for the senior most management across the financial services industry, brokerage houses, intermediaries, mutual funds, asset managers, was what is going on, because code and technology that was embedded in their business took over and decided to sell. And it kept selling, and there was no way that the massive amount of data that came to all of these people, that they could do a manual intervention. And we saw a massive, massive amount of stockholder wealth destroyed across the world, including India. And I can tell you, India also suffered, and if I am allowed to be a little dramatic, because of machines, not because of people. This is before the budget, so please don't link it to long-term capital gains equity taxation. So this is my cue to you, Shiva. I've tried to relate it from what I know. I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yeah, so I'll start with the concept of what the topic is about, thinking machines. The first thing I would say is that thinking machines are not science fiction anymore, as we look around us. In Dubai, you have a RoboCop today. It's no longer science fiction. In Dubai, you have autonomous helicopters. In Indore, you have an autonomous traffic light which monitors everything. So it's all around us right now. Okay, it's no longer science fiction. That's the first point I want to make. Second is with relation to companies and managing companies and leading companies. The first thing I would say is every job and the whole part of the value chain is impacted by digitization or automation or whatever you want to call it. The first thing I would do if I were a CEO is to look at the digital ratio in each job. We've always classified jobs as bands, seniority, and things like that. I would actually classify jobs into 0 to 20% digital impact or digital ratio, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, 60 to 80. I would actually map the organization in a very different way and work and really think about the capabilities required at each ratio band. That's something I would do. The next thing I would say is what machines do. We just have too much information today. Our problem is not information anymore. Our problem is insights from information. So what an organization needs to do is to actually build a creative, qualitative kind of a culture and not a data seeking culture. The data seeking culture was in the 80s and 90s when we were short of data. Today in the internet world, data is not short. Insights is short. So I'd say we are in what I call a drip society, data rich but insight poor. So I would advocate much more insighting. The other thing I would say about machines and information, there's just too much information. We collect information on a daily basis, in some cases hourly, some cases weekly, some cases monthly, some quarterly, some annual. However, our decision-making cycles are not aligned to the information gathering cycle. That's a serious challenge for companies. Why do we collect information if our decision is not going to be made based on that information? So decision which is nice to have has to go. You must only collect information which you can work with. In my last company, we looked at, every day we used to have 200 reports. I asked the IT head, Suhail guy, an outstanding professional, asked him how many people read a report. He didn't have an answer to it. So we developed an algorithm to say, if 50% of the intended population is not reading the report, take the report out. We cut the first set by half. We went from 200 to 100. Then we went from 100 to 40. Okay, so you save a lot of time and energy and everybody's laptop, server time, all kinds of things if you just cut unnecessary information. Okay, so that's what I would say. Next is in an organization, if information is freely available, do we need 7 layers in an organization? Do we need 10 layers in an organization? This, I believe, is something the CEO, CIO, and CHRO need to seriously think about. Young people don't want to work through hierarchy. The bulk of young people today want to work max 1, 2 levels. So I believe as thinking machines come in, the layers in a company will trim down. In the old days, in the Welch era, it was 12 to 15. current era at 7 to 10. I believe it won't be more than 3 or 4 in a future world. Okay, that's something that we seriously need to think about. Okay. Then the final thing is, as machines come in, how do the policies of men and machines, women and machines, what will we have in a workplace? Because the cost of machines has dropped dramatically. The cost of a drone today is 35,000 odd. Used to be, many lakhs before. The cost of a robot today is 15 lakhs. If you take any worker and compute the total cost, it will possibly be costlier than a robot. So we will have, this generation, all of you, will have a system by which you'll have machines and men working side by side. Now, what kind of work policies and work environment are we going to create? Okay, and what does that interface mean? I think that's one of the things I don't have an answer for, but I personally believe that we need to address it in the era of thinking machines. The last point I'd make before I hand over back is, in an information age, in an automated age, trust is being lost or earned every 24 hours. What you do last night gets your trust this morning. Okay, you see news, you see content, he would be a better guy to talk about it. Trust is a 24-hour game. So whatever we do, trust is the most fragile thing that we need to think about. Okay, and you can't outsource trust, you can't outsource culture, you can't outsource leadership. Whatever happens with machines, these are 3 things you cannot outsource. These are fundamental requirements of a great company and great leadership. That's all.
Thank you very much. Fascinating points, and I'm going to come back to you on thinking machines and no hierarchies. Very good point, Shiva. Debjani, over to you.
Thanks. Shiv, you just laid out a beautiful framework, foundation in terms of how organizations should, or leaders should think about organizations in the age of thinking machines. I'll add one part to it. I think as a leader, you also have to start thinking about, what does this do to your role? What does this do to leadership as a whole? And let's not be under any kind of illusion that as the technology advances happen, it will not impact leadership. It will impact leadership, and it will impact leadership in a pretty deep way. And as a leader, I think that's one thing we have to be thinking about, we have to be prepared for. And I want to bring out a few points here. If you look at what technology is doing today, where are they better than us? They are better when it comes to cognitive analytic processes, right? Looking at the data, crunching the data, coming out with what the data tells you. May not be the insights, but the facts. What is the data telling you? A lot of leadership time today gets spent on doing exactly that. And that is not going to be needed anymore. The machines are going to be able to do that better than the human. So what does that mean for a leader? And this is where I'm both fascinated and very excited about what the future holds. Because I think we are going to go into an age where leadership will go back to what leadership fundamentally meant, the humane values, the behavior, the softer skills. And that's what will define leaders or differentiate leaders, the level of engagement we have, the vision that we have, the insights that we are able to bring as a result of that vision, the way we can connect with employees, the trust factor that Shiv talked about. All of this is going to become extremely important as machine and woman and man starts working together. I think it's going to completely change the dynamics of leadership. There's another thing about that change that excites me a lot. I think we are finally going to reach a stage where leadership is not going to be a man's world or man's domain anymore. Because as the softer skills come into play, as the human behavior come into play, we will be looking for the best talent. We will be looking for people who can do the job best, who have the ability to engage the best, who have the ability to see what others cannot see, the vision, who are trustworthy, who are credible. And when you look at all these factors, I don't think you can say that a woman cannot do any of these things. In fact, you will say that in many cases, maybe a woman can do them even better. So that's another factor about what's happening, the transformation that we are seeing, that makes me tremendously hopeful. Because I think with the way the machine and human beings are going to interact, human beings have to go back to basic human values. We have to build, strengthen those basic human values. And we have to ensure that we are way better than the machines when it comes to the basic human values, because that's what's going to differentiate us. And I think that's going to make the world an equal playing field. So when you look at all of this together, I think it's going to be a tremendously exciting journey. And maybe it's going to fix some of the problems. Of course, it all depends on how we use the machines and what we do with it. But if we use it right, if we use it with the right level of responsibility, I think it'll fix some of the problems we are seeing today. Thank you
very much. And I got a question out of this. Can vision be coded or embedded into a machine? We'll come to that after Nitin's turn. Nitin, over to you.
Good afternoon. Last 2.5 days, we have heard fascinating stories about new technology and how the potential, how that is going to change business, how that is going to change our lives. I think this particular discussion is very, very critical. This is really about the how-to, because our ability to harness the new technologies finally gets down to the leaders at the helm who will drive this. My own view is that we have quite a challenge. My experience is that the growth in leadership capacity and organization design is severely lagging the growth in technologies. I have seen this from Fidelity, which is a very large, very successful company where I was involved in the transformation of that company. I saw it very close in Flipkart, which is a large enterprise born out of the digital age. I am seeing it in my firm in CEDO, where we are advising many large enterprises on technology change. I think this is a challenge. This is a challenge. I believe, as I said earlier, our leadership models, our leadership capacity is severely lagging what technology is now capable of. I think there are at least 5 changes or five kind of themes that I believe leaders and organizations need to reflect on, changes that need to happen. The first is bridging the gap between business and technology. In a traditional linear world, business was business, technology was the enabling function. These boundaries are blurring. Business has become technology, technology has become business. And our leaders need to step up. Our business leaders now need to become technology leaders, and our technology leaders need to become business leaders. So that is the first big shift. The second shift, I believe, we have been talking about from managers to leaders for a long, long time. I think this era, the era of thinking machines, really forces us. Because in this era of thinking machines, we are in a world which is very volatile, very fast-changing, very ambiguous. And you have to make decisions. You have to make decisions at speed in this ambiguous world. You also have to be audacious. You have to take risks. You cannot work with business as usual. A lot of the core data is going to come from the machines, as Shiv pointed out. So you need a wisdom. That's the point that Debjani made. You need a wisdom beyond this. All of this is moving from manager to being a leader. Yeah? Working in uncertainty, being audacious, taking big risks, making big decisions. That's the second big shift. The third shift is that while you do that, while you face the high velocity of change, while you work with high speed of decision making, I think it is also very important to be centered, to keep calm in the face of chaos. While you are acting very quickly, you also need to be very thoughtful. You need to be very, very centered. And I think this is the land of meditation. This is the land of yoga. And I very strongly believe that the path to our future also lies in that. We need a lot more centeredness, which you can call it spirituality, you can call it mindfulness. I think that theme becomes increasingly important. The fourth shift, or the fourth theme for me, is about managing contradictions. We are in a very complex business and technology world. The expectations of leaders are very complex and contradictory. You need to have a long-term vision, but you need to act in the now, because if you don't execute in the now, the long-term will not be there. You need to act with speed, but you need to be thoughtful. You need to work with technology, but you need to be humane. So there are very contradictory set of requirements which leaders and organizations face. And the ability, the agility to work with contradictions, I think, is going to be really a very important aspect. And the final point I would like to make is that this is, make no mistake, this is about a deep cultural shift. This is actually about reshaping, evolving the core DNA of the organization. This is not an incremental, ornamental shift. And that deep cultural shift will really happen from the top. It will really happen by role modeling from the senior-most leaders. Yeah? So there are just some initial ideas. While I started by saying that, look, there is a challenge, because in my assessment, today the leadership and the organization models are not matching up to the opportunities and the potential that new technologies is opening up. But at the same time, if you're a leader, this is also a very, very exciting opportunity. This is a very exciting opportunity to evolve, relearn, adapt yourself. And if you're able to do that, it's an opportunity then for your enterprises to really get a very big competitive advantage.
Get a competitive advantage. Good point there, Nitin. Lots of questions. I'm going to throw one at you right away. Are we overstating? And I'm trying to play the role of devil's advocate here. Are we overstating the shift? Look back in history when you had the age of flying machines dawn upon us. Didn't other business people face a similar challenge? Didn't early IT do this to a lot of people existing? Are we sort of overstating? Won't it happen naturally? And won't the entire ecosystem learn to adapt to this shift that is taking place?
No. I don't think we are overstating. See, with any big shift in the short term, it appears that not much is happening. But if you look at over a period of time, you can see the magnitude of the shift that has happened. Why I believe, Siddharth, this is different, is that the sheer velocity of technology-led change.
Okay.
Just the velocity of change, I think, is unprecedented. And because of that very high velocity of change, what is happening is that the product cycles and the business cycles have got crunched. So you do not have the luxury of time.
Okay. The reason I also asked this question was because one could also argue that 50 years back, technology was complex. If I can say that, there was a Boston Brahmin club sort of which managed that. Today, technology has also been democratized, and therefore adaptation is easier. But that's just a small point. Shiv, I want to come to you before I go to Debjani. And this is leading off from what Nitin said. Data fright. Sometimes data scares you. I mean, at least from what the business that I manage or have been involved in for many years. And you are faced with the conflict of, do you go by data alone or should you go by your gut instinct? And I I would argue here that sometimes or many times it would be very difficult to fight against your own microbes which guide your gut instinct decisions. Is data and the sheer amounts of data something that can scare away leadership?
So data does scare away leadership. Which measures to look at is absolutely important because you have so much of it. I would say in the past, you could rely on gut instinct and things like that because the nature of change was incremental. Today, the complex environment as well as the response required for that complex environment, both are complex. So you can't rely just on your gut instinct. Okay? Having said that, what happens with data is, and thinking machines, you get one version of the truth, which is good, but each version of the truth has 100 emotions in an organization. That's the challenge to deal with. The challenge is not the one version of the truth. The challenge is the interpretation emotionally of that one version of the truth. But over a period of time, I believe good organizations know how to deal with it. So for example, in my last company, I was telling my friend Balraman last night on this, is forecast accuracy is classically done by sales managers, right? Our best sales managers had a forecast accuracy of 67% of the top 15 SKUs. A year ago, when we ran it through the machine, we recognized that the machine was giving us a 72% accuracy, 700 basis points better. Does it mean that the role of the unit planner and the sales manager is gone? No, it's not. What it means is that they have to be far more sensitive to swings up and down. That is what their role becomes now, and not just forecasting. Earlier, you just forecasted, something landed up, you sold, didn't sell. But now it's about what's going up, what's going down. You have to be finely attuned to changing market conditions. Okay, that is where the skill comes in a future world when machines do the forecasting for you. Okay, that's an example for you which I could give in terms of looking at data, where's the gut, and what do you go for?
Okay.
Siddharth,
yeah, sure, please.
I'll just like to add to that.
If you could keep it closer to your... Yeah.
I'd like to just add to what Shiv said. Siddharth, I think it's both. Your question was, should it be driven by data? Should it be driven more by gut? I think it's both, and it's situational, where what is better. There is a lot more data available. There is opportunity for drawing insights, and one would be foolish not to leverage that opportunity. At the same time, when the same or similar data is available to multiple businesses, how do you draw a competitive advantage? And that is where wisdom and instinct and pattern recognition, which goes beyond the machine, becomes very, very important. I think Daniel Kahneman in his landmark book, Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, has laid it out very beautifully. I think it's again an example of the duality or contradiction point that I made. It is both. You need to use data. At the same time, you need to have the wisdom, you need to have the instinct. I think for a leader, a key skill is the ability to discern when you need to use data and when to trust your instinct.
And when to take that call. So that's a brilliant point. What Nitin is really saying is, if the same set of data is available to competitors, the winner will be someone who deploys the rest of the skills beyond just the data. Debjani, I want to come back to you on that point. When you were speaking, this question that came to mind, from a technology evolution point of view, realistically, and I don't mean this question in jest, can we expect that vision will get embedded into the machine, into the code, and even that part of an entrepreneur putting out his vision or senior top management deciding on a 5-year blueprint being guided, can machines sort of fill in the blanks there?
See, behind every smart machine or robot is an even smarter man or a woman designing the algorithms, building the software, and telling that machine what to do. So the machine can do anything we want it to do. It's a matter of what do we want it to do. I think this is where companies, countries have to very clearly come out with the design principle for AI or any other technology development. What are we designing technology for? Is it to augment? Is it to replace? Is it to take over everything? What are we? Now, human beings, we are good at self-preservation, right? We've survived a lot of evolutions and we preserve ourselves well. So we are not going to write codes that's going to completely do away with us, right? I think what we are going to be looking at is the capabilities that computing brings. How do they help us? How do they augment our ability to do better? How do they augment our productivity, our thinking? And start building the codes or start building the algorithms that will help us do the job better. That's how it's ultimately going to be. That's how we are going to design machines to think. Now, you know, you talked about evolution, and I want to bring up a point here. Evolution is not just the pace anymore. Yes, it is very different. The pace is very different because right now what we are dealing with is exponential growth. Something which we are not used to, but we are experiencing it right now. But there are other changes that are taking place. If you look at how technology is working, it's no more the domain of IT. Technology today is all pervasive. It's cutting across different disciplines. For example, if you want to use technology to solve a problem in agriculture, it can't be just the engineers. It has to be the engineers, the farmers, it has to be the policymakers. But a lot of different people have to come together to solve that problem. So there's a fantastic saying that today every engineer needs to develop a very healthy understanding and appreciation of liberal arts. And everyone on the other side needs to develop a very healthy and functional understanding of technology because the worlds are colliding, you know, the boundaries are going away. So that is a fundamental change in terms of how we have worked, how we have behaved, how we've learned, how education happens, right? So the evolution you're talking about is not just the pace. There is a lot more to it. And it will require some serious thinking and some serious change in human behavior to adapt to that.
Absolutely. I'm glad you expanded on that. Shiva, I want to come to you, and if any of you have questions, could you please raise your hands? We'll try and get mics into the audience to try and do this very quickly. Shiva, I want you to expand a little bit more in detail with that fascinating term that you use, DRIP, data rich but insight poor. Elaborate it for us, and I want you to, if you can, I would believe that in the Indian context, our governments, both at the federal level right down to the panchayat level, collect the most massive amount of public data, and we know how it gets processed, if at all. Given that context, how would you define and expand on DRIP that you just put out for us?
Yeah, so I would say, I think we have too much data today. Even in an organization, you just collect far too much data. I believe less than 1% of the information which is collected by a company is used. Okay, I can tell you that. I've done this check with many people and asked them how many reports.
And would the 1% rule, sorry to interrupt you, also apply to governments? I'm just your anecdotal gut instinct.
I don't know. And
okay.
I can't comment on that.
Yeah.
So people use less than 1% information. In a way, I want to link it up, back to the same thing of thinking machines. And I was trying to think of an example. Let's take the best thinking machine example with man interface is the aircraft. If today I gave you a choice to say, you will fly in an aircraft without a pilot, vis-a-vis you will fly in an aircraft with a pilot, I promise you will take the second option. You'll never take the first option. There is more technology, more data in the aircraft than anything else. Why do we need that? Because that pilot, finally, there are 1,000 dials there, 2,000 data points coming. But the pilot monitors what's the wind speed, what's the weather pattern looking like, and finally gets you home safe and sound. Okay, there is no substitute finally to good leadership and having good people despite all the machines and all the measures.
And I'm glad you gave that example because many of you would have seen that movie. If you haven't, please go to Netflix and catch it. This is about the captain of American airline who landed in the he landed in the Hudson and then had to face an inquiry where the machine data had said that he had enough sort of capability to go back and land, but he landed on the river.
Yeah.
Continue your point.
Thank you for raising that. That's a great example. I've read Sully's book.
Yeah.
Sully says that, and this is where I believe theoretical concepts are extremely important, even in a machine age. If you read Sully's book, he says, when he was learning how to fly, his instructor told him, if you ever land in water, 17 degrees is it. You better land at 17 degrees. That will when you'll be able to land safely. So when he was coming through for the last 100 meters, his only intent and focus was, let me land at 17. Okay, so machine had a hell of a lot of information, but he still had that knowledge, that basic fundamentals. So in any business, you need fundamentals. So if you look at a company, the first measure I would look at, in spite of all the data you have, is the company gaining share? If you're gaining share, which means your proposition is better attuned to consumers and customers, you're better off. Fantastic. Second, is your internal engagement and employee engagement very high? If your employee engagement is very high, you are more productive than your competitors. And finally, do you have cash flow, which is basically the petrol in the engine? Now, every business monitors 1,000 things, but down to the wire, a company has to run on those 3 things.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you can ask for reams and reams of information, but you must know as a leader to say which are the ones I really need to focus on and really ensure that I act on them and make a big difference in those measures.
Absolutely. Last 8 minutes to the discussion. Nitin, I want you to try and, I'll throw the example at you. I don't know if you'll be able to talk. So from what I know of Flipkart's product sales in the past, the thing that we used to hear was that the highest margin category was jewelry and the highest volume category was mobile phones. The reason I'm sort of using that as an example is try and tell our audience, not particularly for Flipkart but otherwise, that did that kind of sales strategy evolve out of data crunching? Because obviously you were seeing people buy and sell. You would also had time patterns when a product used to be sold in the morning or evening and the shift. Was that guided by data and to what extent?
Absolutely, yes. So it's, we have this debate about Amazon versus Flipkart. And I think, especially the SEC A1 or most people sitting here might have, for them, Amazon might be a preferred e-commerce platform now. But I really wonder that the press and analysts have not asked this question that Amazon outspending Flipkart by a big amount and having superior customer service, proposition, and many other things. Why is Flipkart still way ahead? Why is it that Flipkart still enjoys a 20% plus market share?
Okay.
It is rooted in a very, very deep understanding of the Indian customer and the actual data.
Okay.
They have, at Flipkart, recognized that in India, the e-commerce market is really about 2 things.
So the 1% rule that, or 1% statement that Shiva made doesn't apply to Flipkart? Is it like 20, 30, 40% there, the reliance on data?
I think it's both. It's both. It is both relying on what the data, the market and customer data, and then making some choices. The choices are driven by, is driven by somebody who's got the instinct. But let me explain what the point is, so it will be clear. That the bulk of the market in India, the e-commerce customer, is somebody who is 2.5, 3 lakhs per annum income. It's a point which I think some people miss. What is that person buying? That person really buys 2 things. One is a mobile phone.
Yeah.
Is a mobile phone. Second are clothes. Yeah. So from a value perspective, 60% of the market is mobile. From a volume perspective, 60-65% of the market is what's called lifestyle. In those 2 markets, Flipkart has like a 60 to 70% market share.
Okay.
I think it is it's a very deep understanding of data, unlike somebody who's coming from outside and which is relying on what the market should be like, and therefore focus on books and things like that, which is a very, very small market. Flipkart may be doing many things wrong. It needs to do many things better. but it got that basic understanding of the market based on data very right.
Okay, that's a great example. Shiva, you wanted to...
Yeah, so I would say, I don't think organizations have an option but to automate or digitize. All the work we've done in the companies that I worked at, two obvious benefits come very sharply to you. One is inventory gets reduced dramatically.
Yeah.
Last time around in the company, from 40 days inventory, we went down to 10 days or 9 days. So turns become better, cash use becomes more productive, etc. And the second thing which happens is revenue management models become better. So you get a benefit of using less cash, being fresher, etc. But also you get new business models in terms of revenue management. So both are big benefits which a company sees.
Okay.
I think it's the ability to predict, the ability to forecast, which really gets impacted, which gets much better. But then, of course, as Shiv said, it's about how much do you use it? And how often are you looking at it? Because you have to look at the data in the right time. Right. Timing becomes extremely important, right? So I honestly think whether a company uses 1%, 10%, 50%, it doesn't matter. It's how are they using it, the right timing, and what are they doing with it?
That's very
that is what's critical. Are they taking the right decisions?
So the last question of this panel to you, you spoke about the leadership won't be a man's world. Final comments really expanding on that. Could you elaborate on that? What are you saying? Are you talking about the level-headedness of women generally in business that we have seen in decision making?
No, I think the moment the business environment becomes about talent and nothing else, and I think technology will drive it towards that, it's going to become an equal playing field. And it's not just about genders, but it is going to bring in a lot of diversity, because I don't think there's any more debate that diversity is good for business. There's just tons and tons of data out there. It depends on how much we use that data that shows that when you have a diverse leadership team and when you have women in your boards and in the top management, the businesses do better. Now again, the data exists. It comes back to what do we do with that data. But I think with the advances we are seeing in technology, talent, and as I said, the human talent is going to become extremely important. That's going to be a big differentiator. And I believe that's just going to level out the playing field for everyone.
Absolutely. And that's the final word from this panel, at least for me. It reiterates some age-old values and sayings with regard to top leadership, and therefore if technology is something that you feel is going to change your business, all you have to do is to do what you did really well and continue to do it in a focused manner. Shiva, Debjani, Nitin, thank you very much for your thoughts here. With that, it's a wrap on this session. Thank you for being such great listeners. No, we're done. We're out of time.
Thank you so much, panelists. Debjani, I'm going to request you to hand over tokens of our appreciation to all of our panelists. There you go, ladies and gentlemen, pushing the boundaries, fascinating, thought-provoking insights, but the unquestionable, unwaverable relevance of leadership in the age of machines. Thank you so much, panelists. Thank you so much. Debjani is family, so.